Once upon a time, there was a science fiction and fantasy reader who loved big long series, but sometimes wanted something that was just very high quality that could stand alone by itself. That's what we're talking about today. Welcome back to BellTube. Today I wanted to share with you a list of books that I have given 5 stars to on Goodreads that are all standalone science fiction or fantasy books. Now, I've become far more intentional in the last couple of years about what I actually rate 5 stars. I think a great starting place for this video is to talk a little bit about what I give 5 stars to today versus what I gave 5 stars to in years past. Basically, in years past, if I liked the book, it got 5 stars. Over the last couple of years, I've become far more intentional about what I consider to be a 5-star book. From my personal interpretation, a 5-star book is not only one that I enjoyed, it's not only one that's well written, but it's one that stays with me. It might be the characters in it, it might be the specific plot, it might be a twist that I won't be able to get out of my mind forever that really had a fantastic payoff. But it has to have something that elevates it from a great book to an unforgettable book. And so today I want to share with you 7 fantastic standalone science fiction and fantasy books that I've given 5 stars to over the last few years. I know the title says 5. Let's talk about 7 amazing reads for you today to choose from. Okay, so I decided the best way for me organizationally to present this is go from the shortest book to the longest book. That way for you as the viewer and as somebody who may take these recommendations to heart, we can go from the least committal to the most committal in terms of your reading time. So the first book that we're going to talk about today is a very short one. And in fact, we're not going to talk that much about it at all because it is Piranesi by Susannah Clarke. Now, I believe, and I truly believe, I'm very committed to the belief.
It's not a lie if you believe it.
That the less you know about this book going in, the better of a reading experience it's going to be. It's less than 200 pages, but every page means something. And for me, this was one of the most dreamy and atmospheric reads I've ever read, and it absolutely qualified as a 5-star for reasons that I think we can talk about sometime, maybe if we do a spoiler talk on some of these books. But again, the less you know about Piranesi, the better of an experience it's going to be. That's book number 1. The second book on my list of amazing standalones in both science fiction and fantasy is a science fiction book. It's a classic one by C Clarke. This is Childhood's End. It is less than 300 pages, so it's not a huge commitment. It's a first contact story that is very well delivered in the less than 300 pages that this book is. It left me thinking. It left me wondering what's really out there. C Clarke, back in the 50s when he wrote this, was so far ahead of his time. And if you have not read Childhood's End yet, and especially if you haven't read any C Clarke yet, this is a fantastic place to start. I know his most famous work is 2001: A Space Odyssey, but for me, this is way better. Give this one a shot. So this is our second book on the 5-star science fiction fantasy standalone list. Our third book is also in the science fiction category, and that is The Martian by Andy Weir. This is a fantastic book. It's a great movie too, but even if you've seen the movie already and you haven't read the book itself is its own experience. I highly encourage you to do that. You can really do one or the other or both, and I don't really think it matters which order you do it in, but Andy Weir has figured out a way to make even the simplest of us science fiction readers feel a little bit smarter than maybe that we actually are, because he explains science in a way that the average layperson, while we may not understand the equations, we understand enough about what he's talking about that the purpose behind those equations becomes meaningful to us. This is an incredible story. I read it far after it was published. I'm so glad I did. I probably read this in 2 days, maybe a day and a half. It's not a very long book. That's why it's the third book on my 5-star standalone science fiction reads, because it is a quick read, but it is impactful. Big, strong suggestion for The Martian here. Before I get into book number 4, I would ask if you do like the content that's happening here on BellTube, please consider giving a subscribe to the channel, like the video, and very importantly, hit that post notification bell. That lets you know when I drop a video, and that actually helps build our community. Our 4th book today, as long as we're on the Andy Weir bandwagon, is going to be Project Hail Mary, another fantastic 5-star standalone science fiction book. It's a little bit bigger than The Martian, but again, it reads really fast. Same caveats apply along with The Martian. There's enough science here for a layperson to understand the purpose behind it, but not so difficult that we can't understand it. I'm not going to give you too much information about this book. A little bit like Piranesi, I think the less you know, the better of an experience it's going to be. Suffice it to say, it happens in space. That's all you need to know right now. But if you want a 5-star standalone science fiction book, maybe between big series, this is an absolutely fantastic selection. I can't recommend it enough. So the 5th book on this 5-star list is a book that I've talked about a little bit. It's an author that I've really only read this one book from, and that is Gavriel Kay's Tigana. Now, I will say that Tigana seems to have a bit of a mixed reception on BookTube. Some people like me absolutely love it. It was one of my top 10 reads of 2023. It's a standalone book. It's sort of set in a historically fiction-esque type of a setting, but there's magic involved. Gavriel Kay is not only a master wordsmith, for me, he's a master storyteller, and the plots seem very well outlined and intentional. I don't believe in any sense of the word that Gavriel Kay made this story up as he went along. There are clear points that as you finish the book, you'll realize how he went from point A to point B to point C and so on and so forth. But for me, Tigana was an immediate 5-star. I put the book down and I said, 5-star. I mean, that was the first 2 words out of my mouth when I put this book down was 5-star. Highly recommend Tigana for you. I know that I have The Lions of Al Rassan on my list for 2024. I'm hoping I get a similar experience. I know that there's a lot of booktubers out there that love that book even more than Tigana, but since this has been my personal experience, Tigana, our 5th book of 5-star reads as standalones. Our 6th book of 5-star standalone reads is a book that I don't have a physical copy of. I've looked online trying to find one of the original hardbacks. They're going for about $1,000 right now. So we're going to keep it on the Kindle form for a minute. But that 6th book is Swan Song by Robert McCammon. It came in as my number 2 book of all last year. It's a standalone sci-fantasy. So it's a blend of science fiction and fantasy. It's post-apocalyptic. The nuclear bombs have gone off in America, and the story takes us through the eyes of several characters that grow and develop in tremendous ways, both for good and for evil. But we have a clear beginning, a clear middle, and a clear end, which really does envelop this standalone book. It comes in at 303,000 words, so this is not a small task to read. For me, it read really fast. In Swan Song, like I said, as a sci-fantasy, while it starts off in that post-apocalyptic world, and we're dealing with the ramifications of nuclear fallout, we find out sort of about a third of the way, maybe midway through the book, that there are magical elements as well at play. And he combines them so richly that it doesn't really feel like so much of fantasy, and it doesn't really feel like so much of science fiction. It's a real honest blend, and you don't get that very much. Add in on top of that unique storytelling device characters that will stay with me forever, and I truly believe they'll stay with you forever, at least a few of them. It really makes Swan Song a fantastic option for a standalone book if you want to read something that might take you a little bit longer than a normal standalone, but leave you with that 5-star experience. Try Swan Song. I don't think you're going to regret it. As a matter of fact, I've not seen a single booktuber think anything less than amazing of Swan Song by Robert McCammon. Now, our last book that we're talking about today for 5 stars is even bigger than Swan Song, so we did this in the order of words that are on the page, and that is also by the same author who wrote the shortest book on the list. That is, of course, Susannah Clarke's Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. This sucker is huge. This thing is a doorstop. It is set in the early 1800s in England in an alternative history. So it's a little bit like historical fiction in a sense, but it revolves around these 2 main character magicians that are trying to bring magic back to the world of England. It's a really unique story. I read it long before I discovered booktube. And for me, I just thought the idea of 2 magicians trying to bring back magic to 19th century England would be a fascinating tale. I had no idea the skill level that the author Susannah Clarke has. In reading this and in reading Piranesi, it is obvious to me that her prose, her vocabulary is at the top of the mountain. We're talking about her really in the same category as Gene Wolfe, really very much the highest echelon of Wordsmith Mountain. If there was such a place as Wordsmith Mountain, I think Gene Wolfe and Susannah Clarke would probably have a cabin at the top of the mountain. It's a very interesting book in that it's unlike what you might think it is once you go in. I don't want to spoil too much. Suffice it to say that she's fantastic with character development. There are specific character arcs. There's unique personalities. There's the Fey realm involved in this. Everything magical that you can imagine about Victorian England really does come into play in this book. So at 309,000 words, this is the biggest of all of them. I really do recommend Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. It's a 5-star read if you want to read a really big book that you're going to walk away from saying, that was really cool. Those 7 books I gave all 5 stars to right off the go. As soon as I put that book down, it was immediate into my mind, no thinking required, that's a 5-star book. Which brings us really into our one for the road today, and we're talking about standing alone. And sometimes we've got opinions, and sometimes we have thoughts, and sometimes occurrences happen in our lives that we find ourselves standing alone. And sometimes we question, is everybody else right and I'm wrong? The answer is maybe. They may have facts that we don't have as individuals, but sometimes our inner gut speaks the truth. And sometimes it's okay to stand on your own. Sometimes it's okay to stand alone. I found for myself, and I know you might think this is kind of crazy, but sometimes when I feel like the world is against me, I imagine a superhero cape that I'm walking around wearing. And I ask myself, what would somebody like Superman do? When you have that imaginary cape on, you feel sometimes like you can stand alone, even when sometimes it feels like the world's against you. That's our one for the road today. Those are 7 amazing science fiction and fantasy 5-star reads. I have far more amazing standalone reads for us to talk about coming up this year. Of course, we're going to do some 5-star series as well. We'll get to them in good time. Have a great day, you guys. And of course, here's your fortune.